Today's presentation pertains to dietary food trends, where we'll be focusing on the ketogenic diet in depth. We'll be exploring the makeup and limitations of the food trend, its origins, and many other important topics surrounding the diet. The ketogenic diet is a high-fat, low-carbohydrate eating pattern designed to shift the body's energy source. The goal is to enter a metabolic state called ketosis, where fat instead of carbohydrates becomes the body's primary fuel. People follow the keto diet for many reasons, such as weight loss, managing type 2 diabetes, improving metabolic health, or even controlling epilepsy. The diet's flexibility and medical roots have contributed to its popularity as both a therapeutic and lifestyle trend. When carbohydrate intake drops below 50 grams per day, the body quickly uses up stored glucose, known as glycogen, over the course of 3 to 4 days. Once glycogen is depleted, the body shifts to alternative energy pathways. These include glucogenesis, where it creates glucose from sources like amino acids and glycerol, and ketosis, where it breaks down fats into ketone bodies. These ketone bodies include acetoacetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone, which are what supply most of the energy your body needs. The classic ketogenic diet follows a strict 4 or 3 to 1 ratio of fats to protein and carbohydrates combined. Typically, this means just 10 to 15 grams of carbs per day, about 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight, and the rest of calories being allotted to fat sources. However, many variations exist, such as Atkins diet, the carnivore diet, low-carb high-fat, modified Atkins diet, and modified keto diet. Each of these variations have their restrictions of their own, but all share the core principles of carbohydrate limitation. The ketogenic diet has deep historical roots, with its therapeutic origins tied to epilepsy treatments as early as the 1900s. In 1911, French physicians first studied fasting as a method to treat epilepsy. This approach mimicked metabolic changes that occurred during starvation. In 1916, Bernard McFadden and Hugh Coughlin promoted fasting as a treatment for epilepsy. Coughlin believed seizures were caused by intestinal toxins and prescribed fasting for up to 25 days. The so-called water diet saw 90% of epileptic children and 50% of adults improve or become seizure-free. Around the same time, Dr. McMurray reported success using a sugar-free and starch-free diet, making one of the earliest therapeutic uses of what we now recognize as the ketogenic diet. In 1921, endocrinologist Roland Woodyat observed that his patients undergoing the high-fat, low-carb water diet produced ketone bodies, these same compounds seen during starvation. His discovery led him to the term ketogenic diet. By 1960, researchers found that MCT oils, or medium-chain triglycerides, could increase ketone production. The rise of anticonvulsive therapies resulted in the decline of keto use for epilepsy, although it remained essential for the 20 to 30% of patients who didn't respond to the drugs. In 1971, Peter Huntenlocher revamped the ketogenic diet by using MCT oils to provide 60% of calories, allowing more room for carbs and proteins. This made the diet easier to follow, especially for children with epilepsy. By 1990, keto saw a resurgence, shifting from epilepsy to a focus on weight loss and metabolic health, including diabetes. In 2013, the diet went mainstream, boosted by social media and public figures who advocated for its health benefits. Additionally, specialists have broadened the scope of their research to include a wider array of conditions that may be treatable with the ketogenic diet. Conditions such as cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, psychiatric illnesses, neurological disorders, narcolepsy, and many more are currently being explored. When it comes to the keto diet, we've already touched a little bit on its limitations earlier while discussing the food trend itself. As previously mentioned, carbohydrate consumption must be really limited in order to push one's body to make that metabolic shift, as well as maintain it. According to most sources, typically that looks like consuming sub 50 grams of carbs per day, although other sources do suggest stricter carb intake that looks more like 10 to 15 grams. And when looking at the remaining macros, typically that'll look like 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight, and the rest of calories being allocated to fat consumption. Additionally, caloric maintenance is set lower to accommodate the fact that burning fat utilizes fewer calories than carbs, therefore reducing daily energy expenditure and requirements. Due to this significant carb restriction, foods such as fruits, many starchy vegetables, legumes, rice, and nearly all grains or wheat-based products such as breads, cereal, pasta, baked goods, and many processed snacks are prohibited for the most part. Keto-friendly foods include many vegetable options, although you have to be careful because certain are high in carbs, such as starchy vegetables. Therefore, most of the bulk of vegetables that are accessible for someone partaking in this diet would be things like leafy greens, zucchini, eggplant, tomato, avocado, and then other foods that are commonly eaten on this diet would be things such as fish, meat, cheese, butter, oil, and many more. The main idea is just to pick foods that are extremely low in carbs that will fit within the carb restrictions and higher in fat with moderate protein. The following is a more in-depth list of food options that is acceptable for this diet. Feel free to pause and take a look. Here we have a great meal option for someone following the ketogenic diet. We have a cognac noodle stir fry. As you can see, we have all of the ingredients as well as their quantities, their macronutrients, and the total macronutrient breakdown. For those of you who don't know what cognac noodles are, they're a Japanese style noodle that is from the cognac yam, known for their high fiber, low carb, low calorie, and great for digestive health and blood sugar levels. Now, this is a superb meal option as the ketogenic diet can frequently appear very restrictive or distant from meals that are typically enjoyed. Thereby, this actually facilitates dietary adherence, which is a big issue when it comes to the ketogenic diet because this kind of increases that meal satisfaction. By substituting the main carb source of a typical stir fry with the cognac noodles, individuals are able to enjoy a meal that appears more familiar without the use of any processed or artificial, quote-unquote, keto-friendly alternatives to high-carb foods. Additionally, as mentioned, cognac is known for its high fiber content. Now, this high fiber is really a key point of this meal because fiber is typically something that is hard to acquire on the keto diet, and so makes it a great option to make sure we're getting enough fiber in there. Additionally, this meal is a great option because of the fact that it provides many of the micronutrients that most people might fall short on when on the ketogenic diet. Things such as beef, green onions, and garlic provide a source of B1 and 6. The egg yolk provides a great source of vitamin B7. B12 is found in beef. Iron is found in beef and bok choy. Phosphorus is found in beef and these sesame products. Onto the analysis, we'll be talking about if our nutritional needs are met through this diet, as well as the advantages and the disadvantages of the diet. When evaluating if our nutritional needs are being met through the ketogenic diet, an easy way to figure that out is by comparing it to the Canadian Food Guide. Now, according to the Food Guide, half of our plate is meant to be fruit, vegetables, 1/4 is meant to be whole grains, and the other quarter is supposed to be made up of lean protein sources. Whereas, when you look at the ketogenic diet, on average, a plate would look like the picture that is seen on the right. We can see that the plate is made up of low-carb vegetables. We have a source of protein that will typically be cooked in oils, and then a healthy fat source. Comparatively speaking, it's very evident that there is not enough carbs and far too much fat, as well as not enough fiber. The Canadian Food Guide strongly encourages a fiber-rich diet, even stating, quote, "For a healthy diet, increase the amount of fiber you eat," quote. They claim that this is because it is important for bowel regularity, lowering blood cholesterol levels, and feeling fuller for longer. And this is exactly the reason as to why they have 1/4 of the plate being whole grains and the other half being fruits and vegetables, because these are rich fiber sources. The same thing goes for the fat intake. The food plate doesn't exactly have a section for fat itself, but rather suggests that individuals choose foods containing unsaturated fats. Another important point to mention is the fact that the food guide encourages people to eat a large variety of foods. The idea behind this is so that individuals are able to tick all the boxes for essential micronutrient intake. Seeing as food selection is greatly narrowed on the ketogenic diet, this strongly reduces the variety of foods that are accessible for those partaking in the diet. And this is where the risk of micronutrient deficiencies might enter the picture. As previously stated, the nutrients listed below are nutrients that risk being consumed in inadequate quantities on the diet. Here you can clearly see the misalignment of the macronutrient distribution in the ketogenic diet compared to the acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges shown on the DRI tables. As the body adjusts metabolic pathways from a carbohydrate metabolism or fed state to ketosis, undergoing what is known as keto flu is a known possible side effect. Symptoms include nausea, vomiting, headache, fatigue, dizziness, constipation, and a few other symptoms, all of which generally last for no more than a few days and does not happen to everyone. The modern Western diet is largely made up of refined carbohydrates, grains, processed foods, and other carbohydrate-rich items of similar nature. These foods are considerably less expensive in contrast to foods such as meat. Seeing as the ketogenic diet restricts the former and focuses primarily on the latter, the cost of groceries may be a difficulty faced for certain following the diet, although certain actually argue that it is the opposite. Dietary adherence is often something that many individuals struggle with when trying to follow the ketogenic diet, as they feel far too deprived of foods they once enjoyed, which is typically often due to a couple reasons, one of which being emotional and psychological reasons. Those who've struggled with the perception of food in any way may undergo some sentiments of psychological distress due to the close monitoring of food intake to ensure proper nutrition and proper macronutrient distribution to maintain a state of ketosis. For these individuals, issues such as problematic restrictiveness, binging, stress, and anxiety, and more may potentially arise. So it's important to note that this phenomenon does not strictly apply to the diet alone, but rather dieting in general for these individuals. Another factor that might play a role on dietary adherence can be the social aspect and implications of the diet. So seeing as the average American diet and the ketogenic diet are so vastly different, challenges arise regarding social gatherings, since many of which involve food. Oftentimes, the foods served when eating out are very high in carbohydrates, sugars, and calories, and completely misaligned with the macronutrient distribution of the ketogenic diet. During social outings, activities, or gatherings, the likelihood of there being any suitable food options for their dietary needs is quite low. As a result, participants of the diet may either resort to not partake in any social activities, which may lead to feelings of isolation, or participating knowing they will have to work around the dietary needs and possibly feeling left out. And others may go to these gatherings and slip up, which is not really functional for this diet due to the mechanism of actions that we've already talked about earlier. The ketogenic diet heavily restricts fruit and vegetable intake, as well as most fiber-forward foods, making it far more complicated to maintain an adequate fiber intake. While it is possible to consume adequate fiber, it's a far more calculated endeavor compared to diets that include fruits, veggies, fiber-rich grains. Fiber insufficiency can result in various digestive complications. Additionally, the heavy restriction of the same foods may also lead to certain vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Nutrients such as vitamin B1, 6, 7, 12, calcium, iron, magnesium, and phosphorus are all things to look out for, all of which having their own set of symptoms and complications if deficient. One of the many benefits of this diet is the weight loss benefits. Now, this is probably the most common and modern use for the diet. It's definitely what people typically will associate the diet with in current days. Now, many of studies have been conducted and have confirmed their weight loss benefits. There have been many studies, many randomized control trials, and one meta-analysis looked at 11 randomized trials analyzing participants adhering to low-carb versus low-fat plans. Now, findings even demonstrated that those following the low-carb plan lost 2.17 kilograms more than the low-fat diet. This is due to the reduced feelings of hunger when in a ketogenic state. A study was conducted where participants followed high-protein diets with 2 weeks of high carb and the following 2 weeks with reduced carbs. Subjects reported significant appetite reduction during the low-carb regimen. Studies demonstrate that it's the increased level of ketone bodies that could lead to reduction of feeling of hunger. Additionally, athletes are often seen using this diet for its rapid weight loss benefits, typically in sports involving weight classification. In recent years, research has looked into using the ketogenic diet as a form of cancer management. Studies have shown reduced sizes in tumors and increased radiation efficiency of those on the ketogenic regime. Most cells use oxygen to make energy efficiently, while cancer cells ignore the oxygen and use glycolysis instead. The ketogenic diet would essentially exploit the biased metabolism of cancer cells by lowering the glucose availability and increasing ketones, which aren't efficiently metabolized by cancer cells. One major advantage of the ketogenic diet is its impact on metabolic health. It's used in treating serious metabolic diseases like GLUT1 deficiency, pyruvate dehydrogenase deficiency, and type 2 diabetes. The diet reduces sugar-laden food intake, which is important because higher sugar consumption is linked to a 44% increase in metabolic syndrome and a 26% higher diabetes risk. It also disrupts something called the Randle cycle, where glucose and fatty acids compete in use in cells. By limiting carbs, the body prioritizes fat metabolism, easing cellular stress, and improving overall metabolic function. This unique metabolic shift is why keto is increasingly explored for treating obesity, insulin resistance, and even mitochondrial dysfunction. While it is true that the ketogenic diet does cause increase in LDL cholesterol levels, research demonstrates that levels are normalized over time, meaning that the increase is most likely due to the body's adjustment to the metabolic shift. Therefore, this is only a short-term concern. Not to mention, good, or HDL, cholesterol levels are actually increased while being on the ketogenic diet, all while lowering LDL cholesterol levels, which in turn lowers the risk of heart disease. Do I think that this trend is beneficial to society? I think that this is a pretty nuanced question. Now, I think that it's very beneficial for those struggling with epilepsy and any sort of metabolic diseases. The diet has made major breakthroughs as a form of treatment for these conditions and can significantly increase the quality of life for these individuals, as well as for those who are seeking out the keto diet for weight loss. Losing weight drastically increases quality of life. Although due to the fact that this diet's resurgence in popularity is taking place in conjunction with the rise of social media, where misinformation is now more than ever a problem, this can pose a risk for many individuals acquiring improper information about the diet and implementing this knowledge to their own personal lives. This is where the second question comes in. Do I think that this is a harmful trend? I believe that if people try to implement this diet ill-informed due to either a lack of research or acquiring misinformation, then this can pose many health risks. As previously mentioned, if someone tries to partake in this diet without being very frugal about what they put in their body, they may pose risks of being deficient in many nutrients. In terms of diet-related concerns, we've already mentioned many, but to put it simply in short-term and long-term, short-term concerns would look like things such as the keto flu, as well as increased levels of LDL cholesterol. And long-term concerns would look like certain deficiencies, such as fiber and many other previously mentioned, where the health concerns vary depending on the specific nutrients that someone would potentially be deficient in. The keto diet affects athletes and non-athletes very differently. For non-athletes, fat oxidation peaks at around 47 to 52% VO2 max, which fits well the keto's slow, steady energy burn. But athletes need more. At moderate to high intensity, around 59 to 64% VO2 max, the body switches from burning fat to needing fast energy from muscle glycogen. On keto, that glycogen isn't readily available, which may impair performance. Keto also limits muscle building potential if protein intake isn't optimized. While some versions of keto are low in protein, an approach like low-carb, high-fat, high-protein may better support muscle development, especially important for athletes. Plus, athletes require a nutrient-dense diet for optimal results. High-carb foods often push out healthier options like nuts, fruits, and whole grains, creating potential gaps. That said, weight loss from keto can benefit athletes in weight class sports, and endurance athletes may see higher fat burning efficiency, but only to a certain point. However, carb cycling can help bridge this gap. Studies show that reintroducing carbs for performance restores glycogen and avoids fatigue, without negating the benefits of keto. The kinds of modification I would apply to the ketogenic diet really depend on the goals of the individual following it. If an athlete were to adopt the ketogenic diet, I'd recommend adjusting it to a low-carb, high-fat, high-protein approach. Traditionally, keto emphasizes moderate protein, but to prevent muscle loss, I would increase protein intake to high rather than moderate levels. I'd also break this down further, depending on the type of sport the athlete is involved in, whether it's weight-classified sport or one that requires endurance. For an athlete aiming to lose weight to meet a weight classification, I'd combine high protein with steeper caloric deficit. For endurance athletes, I'd recommend replenishing glycogen stores by consuming carbohydrate the day before an important performance. This strategy is based on how the body reacts to high-intensity activities, like previously talked about. Now, if this is an individual who's partaking in the keto diet due to epilepsy and seeking it as a form of treatment, the modification I would make in that case is implementing MCT oils into my diet, which would in turn increase the level of ketone bodies and loosen up the restrictions for the macronutrient distribution, making it more effective and efficient and easier to follow. If an individual is partaking in the ketogenic diet due to diabetic or metabolic reasons, I would honestly strongly suggest a collaborative approach with a doctor and build a support system. That way, all of the modifications can be personalized to their personal conditions and optimize their adherence, therefore maintaining their health. And lastly, if an individual is seeking out the ketogenic diet for its weight loss benefits, the modifications that I would make would be going on a biphasic ketogenic diet, meaning that during certain phases I would go into keto, and then other phases I would go into a regular diet with a stronger calorie deficit. The goal of this is to optimize chances of someone adhering to the diet by introducing periods of times where they are able to consume other foods that they may be more used to eating, making the diet a little bit more manageable. Not to mention, I would prioritize supplementation. This would ensure avoiding cravings, which would then increase adherence rates, making the diet much more successful. Additionally, I would also prioritize unsaturated fats. And while this is not a diet modification, I would simply advise that the individuals partaking in the diet would be well researched and consider all of their options just to make sure that this diet is right for them. Now, could I follow this diet? I believe that I could definitely follow this diet short term. However, I don't know if this would be a realistic diet for me long term. This is due to the fact that I think adherence would become an issue due to social factors. And if I were following this diet and had the option to implement any sort of modifications, I would increase the level of protein and allow myself to replenish my glycogen stores before any days of important athletic performances due to the fact that I'm an athlete. All to prioritize muscle building and performance during endurance. Although I have not clearly stated my opinion during this personal reflection, I believe I have thoroughly explored my opinion. But to put it a little bit more explicitly, I don't think I can say that I 100% think that this is a good or a bad diet, because I think it really depends how effective it will be depending on who goes on it and why they go on it, and how they follow through with it, depending on their adherence, as well as if they decide to implement any modifications. So I think it's a very nuanced answer. I think there's tons of health benefits, especially when it comes to managing chronic conditions and diseases. I think that is something that really stands out from a lot of other diets, although it is in complete misalignment with the Canadian Food Guide. And so according to that, nutritional needs are not fully met. And so that is something to consider. The following are the cited sources. Pause to take a look, and thank you so much for listening to my presentation.